Hello, all. Garland Nixon here, and Joe Biden's regime change monsters are up to no good again. This time in Nicaragua and Iran. Let's talk. Okay, wow, three people. That's only 2,900 less than normal. Haha. But look, all jokes aside, Chicken Patty, what's happening? And thanks for being there. Chicken Patty keeps me grounded. She keeps this channel going, keeps this channel grounded. All right, plenty to talk about as always. And this time we're going to some other areas of the world other than Ukraine and China. But you'll probably figure this out. Same thing as normal, right? So what's going on? We'll start with Nicaragua. What you may not know, Nicaragua, what do they have? About 6 million people, very small country in South America. There was some issues there going on in the 1980s. The United States was involved in a dirty war in which there was a socialist organization called the Sandinistas. The United States supported the right-wing group, the Contras. It was pretty much a U.S. group. It was a U.S. proxy. It was the U.S. puppet group. And of course, it all had to do with the U.S. saying everything in Latin America and South America, that's our backyard, that's ours. We control completely all of those governments, all of those countries. They will do what we tell them to do. They will only have governments that are completely compliant. And therefore, now see, here's the other part. And therefore, why was that going on? There are people that actually believe that it's ideological, that are like, yeah, because there's socialism there and they hate socialism. Well, there's natural resources there, because ultimately empire is what? Empire is about a big country who needs a lot of stuff going out to small countries that have the stuff they need and or won't, and having the might to take it, right? So that's what was going on all throughout South America. Just like the rest of the world, the U.S. had determined that the Nicaraguans, the Sandinistas, wanted to do what a lot of, let's be honest, the South American socialist governments want to do. So in case you don't know, I will fill you in, because I've been there, talked to the people, been to South America. I have a lot of friends that are back and forth there. I understand the culture. I understand the people. I understand the politics. And for those of you who don't understand South America, South American politics, what they call Bolivarian socialism, that's what they call it. Let me explain it. If you've heard it before on my channel, forgive me, but there may be those who haven't. So I will explain South America to you, just so you'll understand it. So for the most part, South American socialism, as it were, and you may wonder, why does that align? Why are the South Americans so aligned with the Russians? The South Americans love the Russians. The U.S. is really kind of upset, the Russians and the Chinese, really upset right now, because Sputnik and RT are very, very popular in South America, right? Extremely popular. The Russians and the Chinese are extremely popular in South America. Let's talk about why. There are a number of economic models the U.S. has chosen, if that's the right term, for being having neoliberalism forced upon us. Neoliberalism, which is a form of capitalism that's expansionist. And it is basically, neoliberalism is a form of capitalism. People just say capitalism. There's more than one kind of capitalism. There's not just one kind. Neoliberalism, which has become the predominant and I would say controlling force of capitalism in the world, because the United States empire forces neoliberalism upon everyone, upon other countries, is one form of capitalism that takes money extracts money. Neoliberalism extracts money from the general funds, from the government funds, from the workers, from every day, and it funnels it up to a tiny fraction, a tiny percentage of people. It concentrates power into the hands of a few oligarchs, and those oligarchs take over and rule everything. That's neoliberalism in a nutshell. I can get into a lot more of it than that, but I'm just going to simplify things. Okay. South American, here's what they want. I will make it clear. It's not this is not difficult. Venezuela, Nicaragua. What do they want? What do they want in Venezuela? We have Bolivarian socialism. It's a Bolivarian republic named for Simon Bolivar. He's the guy who, many years ago helped them to free them, helped the areas to be freed from Spanish imperial control, right? Okay. It's real simple. They want to be able to vote in their leaders. They don't want dictators. They want to vote in the people who are in charge of the country. And here's what they want. Those countries are rich in natural resources, be it, bananas or chocolate or, in oil, gold, lithium, you name it. South America is very rich in natural resources, right? So let's say, as an example, Bolivia or that has a lot of lithium and gas and other things. Venezuela, they got a lot of oil. What do they want? Simple. They want to nationalize it. In other words, they want the government to control. They want it to be government-run companies that sell the oil. Citgo was the Venezuelan oil company. The U.S. actually stole the company, but that's another. We can go on with that. So what do they want to do? They want the government to sell the natural resources, to take the profits, and to fund a substantial social safety net. In a nutshell, that's it. We call it names and all, but it ain't complicated. Whatever they got, if it's oil, if it's whatever, they want the government to nationalize that, the government to sell that, whatever it is on the world market, to take that money and to fund the government. And that way, the government gets funded and they have a substantial social safety net program, and they don't have to pay much of anything in taxes. That's what they want in a nutshell. Well, why would they align with Russia? You ever heard of Gazprom? What does Russia do? Russia's economy very much aligns with those. Russia, what does it have? Major, big old company that is brings in lots of money. The people in Russia don't have high taxes at all. They have a reasonable social safety net, but the government nationalized the big oil and natural resources, and they make money. Now it's a mixed economy there, and and to be quite frank, you go to South America, they want a mixed economy. It's a hybrid socialism that wants a mixed economy. You go to China, what do they have? They've got a mixed economy, right? And what do? They sell stuff, and that money funds the government. You don't have high taxes. The government's funded through nationalizing corporations. It's an alternative economic model. You can like it, you cannot like it, but it's their country, and in my opinion, they have a right to do it whatever they want. You know what I'd call, if I ever run for office, you know what I would call it? The Alaska model. I'd say we want the Alaska model. Why is that? Because that's what they do in Alaska. If you live in Alaska, you actually get a check every year, or it might be monthly, but because why? Because there's oil and natural resources in Alaska, and it's believed that the people are supposed to get a part of that. In other words, Alaska is a Bolivarian socialist republic in some ways. You can make that argument, right? Bottom line is, that's not insane. If you think about that, whether you want it in your country or not, it's not crazy to say, my country has oil, lithium, whatever. I want the government to nationalize it. I want the government to sell it. I want the government to be funded off of that. Don't tax the hell out of me. And I also want that money to give me a strong social safety net. Agree with it or not? Now you know that's what Venezuela wants. That's what Nicaragua wants. Now the U.S. government actually wants their companies to come in and to profit off of those natural resources. And the profit never gets back to the people there. And that's been the model that the U.S. has oppressed onto those people, right? We take your stuff, we sell it, we keep the money, you get nothing. Oh, by the way, we abuse the peasants and slaughter them at will. That's kind of been the U.S. model for South America, and they don't like it for obvious reasons. Okay. So the U.S.'s, of course, plan is regime change. Any country that doesn't go along with what we want to change their government, put in a compliant puppet state, and voila, what do you know? We got your natural resources again. Let's go to Iran. Same thing. Now, the Iranian government is different. It is a Islamic republic. That's a lot of that is religious and cultural. You have to understand that in Iran, the issue of religion and government is inextricably linked to culturally speaking, right? You have to also understand a little bit of history in Iran. 1953, 52, the United States and the UK overthrew the Iranian government. And the reason was that the democratically elected leader, whose name was Mohammed Mossadegh, Iran was an extremely poor country. And he said, well, we got all this oil, and BP, well, had a different name then, British Petroleum. They're in there, they're extracting our oil, they're selling our oil, and we're impoverished and we don't get anything of it. And so BP was basically robbing Iran blind. Mohammed Mossadegh says, that's not going to happen. I'm going to become president. We're going to keep our own damn oil. We're going to sell it and keep the money. So the U.S. and the U.K. overthrew the government and put in a brutal dictator by the Shah of Iran. That's the history of Iran, right? The U.S. in Nicaragua, the same thing. There was a family there's an oligarchical family called the Chamorro family. And at one point, one of the members of the Chamorro family was actually the president, or whatever the hell you call it, of Nicaragua. Now, at the time, the Sandinistas were in power. The socialists were in power. The United States government literally said they had a war going on, the Contras and the Sandinistas, that the U.S. government was funding. And there was slaughters and murders, and nuns and priests were being killed and raped. All kinds of terrible, terrible things were happening. Lots of peasants just being slaughtered in this filthy, dirty war. The U.S. was keeping it going. And the U.S. literally said to the people of Nicaragua, if you vote the wrong way, the war keeps going on and the sanctions keep going on. If you vote for the person that we tell you to vote for, then we'll back off. So under great duress, the Nicaraguan people voted in the person that the U.S. wanted, and needless to say, it didn't work out well for them because it's neoliberalism. They still faced extremely harsh oppression, poverty. The U.S. stole every dime they had, sold all their stuff, and robbed them blind, right? Of course, which they saw coming. So eventually, the people in Nicaragua woke back up and said, oh, the hell with this. And so they put the Sandinistas back in power. And the U.S. has been angry ever since, because the U.S. wants the Chamorro family and the oligarchs of Nicaragua in power so they can continue to rob them. The Nicaraguans say no. That's kind of a short version of what's going on in Nicaragua. All right. So recently, the Daniel Ortega, who is the leader of the Nicaraguans, he's won again. He's president, and the U.S. says no, he has to go, and the Nicaraguans say no, he doesn't. We want him. So now what you have is an outside entity, the U.S. saying and think about this: the hypocrisy of the U.S. saying, what do they say? Ukraine's an independent, sovereign, democratic nation. But Nicaragua's not independent. They're not sovereign. They're not democratic. They elected their own person freely and clearly. And the guy won in a blowout. He didn't win by the skin of his teeth. He's overwhelmingly supported by the people. And if you look at it, Vladimir Putin, overwhelmingly supported by the people in his country. The U.S., he's got to go. He can't stay in power. Well, the people in charge, the citizens of the country want that person in charge. They can't have what they want in a democratic, independent, and sovereign nation. So the U.S. just simply says, okay, well, then it's not independent. It doesn't matter how clean the election was. They just say, oh, no, it was a dirty election. They didn't really win. Here's something going on in Nicaragua, and you may hear about this, so I'll clear it up for you. One of the other things is the United States says the Nicaraguans are arresting opposition party members and other people who are running for president. Well, first of all, were there some people arrested? Yes. Were they running for president? Not one of them. In fact, some of them were members of the very same Chamorro family. But how did that go about? Was it just crazy oppression? No. Here's what happened. The Nicaraguans created a law that they modeled after the FARA law in America, the Foreign something Representation Act or whatever, Foreign Agent Representation Act, FARA. So the bottom line is this: the FARA Act is, if I am acting on behalf of another government, right, I have to register under FARA with the government. Right now, the reality is that's abused and used. They use it to go after who they want to. They use it to go after media and say they're foreign agents. It's just a mess. But for some reason, like AIPAC never has to register. RT has to register, but AIPAC doesn't have to register. At any rate, so Nicaragua said, okay, fine, we're creating our own FARA law. So they created the exact same thing, almost exact same thing, and basically said, if your organization is getting money from someone outside of the country, by law, you have to file with us and let us know. So what ended up happening was the Chamorro group, these other organizations, they were getting money directly from the CIA. Of course, the National Endowment for Democracy, right? The USAID, right? They were getting money from these U.S. front groups, right? U.S. intelligence front groups. And the government of Nicaragua said, we had it with that crap. You're trying to overthrow the government. You're getting paid by the CIA. You have to file with the government and tell us where you're getting every dime. So they were getting money from the CIA. So needless to say, they couldn't come out and say, the CIA. So they refused. And Nicaragua locked them up. That's how people got locked up, for refusing. Think about this. You're in any country you're in, and you make a law that says if you've got an organization, in this instance, these was organizations that were anti-government, anti-whatever they were doing there, right? So you've got organizations, supposedly nonprofits, that are vehemently opposing to the people in power in your country. And you say to them, we're passing a law. The law says you just got to tell us where you're getting money from. It's from outside the country. And they say, no, we're not going to tell you. Well, guess what? You're going to get locked up. So the Nicaraguan government shut them down and locked them up, as well they should have. And the U.S. says, oh, no, they're evil, locking up their opposition. They're horrible. They're terrible. Wow, we're the ones that were giving money to the opposition. So there's hypocrisy there. The Nicaraguans have a right to govern any way they want to, right? So let's go on to what's happening with good old evil Brandon and Nicaragua. Here we got another article. And what does Brandon and crew do when they're on the move for regime change? And boom, there you got it. Activists slammed latest sanctions placed on Nicaragua by the White House. The Biden administration said on Monday that it would ban U.S. citizens from doing business with Nicaragua's gold industry. The White House has also raised the possibility that it may impose further trade restrictions on the Central American nation, which could include stripping 500 government insiders of their U.S. visas. And there you go. Previous rounds of sanctions has focused on President Daniel Ortega, Vice President Rosario Murillo, who is Mr. Ortega's wife, and members of their family. So there you go. It expands the Trump era decree by accusing Mr. Ortega of hijacking democratic norms, undermining the rule of law, and using political violence against opponents. You talk about projection. You talk about projection. First of all, by doing this to Nicaragua, the United States is undermining the rule of law. It's hijacking democratic norms. Political violence, the U.S. uses real violence. In fact, what's going on in Iran right now, in the midst of these protests, there was a fire in a jail that killed a bunch of people. Everybody knows the CIA is behind that, or the U.S. is behind it. There was an attack on a holy site with machine guns. Again, let's not be stupid. Everybody knows the U.S. is behind that stuff. So bottom line, they're accusing Nicaragua of doing exactly what they're doing, right? The executive order also paves the way for the U.S. to restrict investment and trade with Nicaragua, a move recalling the punishing U.S. embargo imposed in the 1980s during Mr. Ortega's first term as president. Listen to this. They also claim that Nicaragua is a threat to national security, although analysts believe the latest sanctions form part of a reprisal for Nicaragua's continued security cooperation with Russia. So they're a national threat, a country of 6 million people in South America that doesn't really have much of an army. 6 million people. They're a threat to national security. Venezuela, Cuba, all threats to national security. See, the bottom line is this is lawfare. You have laws that say, instead of warfare, it's lawfare. You have laws that say if someone's a threat to national security, we can do this and such to him. So you simply point and say, that guy right there, he's a threat to national security. How? Doesn't matter how. They're not. It is lawfare. It is Julian Assange. You simply accuse someone of something because you don't like them, you want to take an act against them, and you just make up something and you accuse them of that. And that's what's going on with Nicaragua. Condemning the latest U.S. attempt to bring about regime change, the Nicaraguan Solidarity Campaign Action Group said this is the latest in a long line of hostile acts by the U.S. administration, which is determined to suffocate the Nicaraguan economy and bring the country to its knees. It's a move which could lead to thousands of job losses. And that's the plan. That's the plan of Dark Brandon and his sociopathic crew. And that is, hey, we're going to go, this country has stuff we wanted. And bottom line is this, there's two things. They got stuff they want, but here's the other part. Any country that's independent, any country that says to the US, we want to make our own decisions, we want to go in the direction that we want, we don't choose your economic model, we don't choose your woke um, uh, um, social policies, we're not down with that. We are not down with your policies. We want to go our own way. Leave us alone. The United States goes on the attack. No country's allowed to do that. That's all that Russia's about. That's all that China's about. That's all that Iran and Nicaragua and Venezuela. These are all countries that say, no, we will not be under your boot. We will not do what you tell us to do. So the United States declares some level of dirty war on them. And what is it? What's going on now? The United States looked at Russia and China and says they won't do what we want. They won't go along with it. So the United States has to declare a dirty war on those countries. That's what the U.S. does on all countries. Any country that wants to be independent, the U.S. declares a dirty war on them. And what's happening is the countries are sticking together, and the countries such as in the Middle East, the Muslim countries, the South American countries, the African countries have had enough. And they're all saying, screw you, we're back in Russia. That's a reality. That's a reality. All the countries around the world who either exercise independence or have a desire to exercise independence, a thirst for independence that has been squelched by the U.S. empire, are all looking at Russia saying, this is an opportunity. If we all band together, we need to take down this bully. And that's what's going on. Now, the people in the U.S. are all, brainwashed idiots. And they're like, we're doing this for democracy and freedom. I mean, you got to be pretty stupid to believe that. But unfortunately, Americans have been brainwashed for so long that there's nothing left to wash. They're just being washed. No brain left to be washed. They're just walking around believing everything that they're told. Let's talk about Iran. Now, meanwhile, the U.S. says Ukraine is an independent sovereign nation that we overthrew in 2014 and put in a puppet government. It's an independent sovereign nation that the United States pays for the military, political, and social bills, pays every politician. The United States pays their salaries. Every person who gets pensions now, the U.S. pays their pensions, the uniforms. The only thing that the Ukraine provides is bodies to die. The United States arms those bodies, clothes those bodies, directs them out, says, hey, this is where the attack point is, does all the logistics, all the targeting, and says, now send the bodies out there. And of course, the bodies get ripped apart by artillery, but the United States doesn't care. It's like, give us some more bodies. We got more uniforms. The Ukrainians are nothing but bodies, to be thrown to the dogs, to be thrown into the meat grinder, right? So the U.S. is saying, but meanwhile, the U.S. says Ukraine is an independent and sovereign nation. I mean, isn't that what the 30 Democrats who wrote some sad and pathetic letter said? The United States, Ukraine is an independent, sovereign, democratic country, but it's none of the three. It can't be independent and sovereign if you yourself overthrew the damn government. But we can't interfere in them, right? It's an independent, it's sovereign. The United States believes in democracy, right? Let's take a look here. Let's talk about the democracy and sovereignty the U.S. believes in. CNN, after Ukraine, Biden administration turns to Musk's satellite for internet for Iran. Wait a minute. I thought the U.S. was sanctioning Iran. What would they need? We're going to help them get internet. Oh, we've changed everything. We're nice guys. The White House is engaged in talks with Elon Musk about the possibility of setting up SpaceX satellite internet service Starlink inside Iran, right? And you go on. The conversation, which has not been previously reported, comes as the Biden administration searches for ways to support the Iranian protest movement. Well, wait a minute. Would it be okay for the Iranians or the Russians or the Chinese or anybody else to support a protest movement inside the United States? Let's look at something. Wait a minute. Could somebody outside the US do anything? Let me see something. Man, you can't even find it anymore. Here's an example. Let's look at this. Let me show you something. Hands off Uhuru, hands off Africa, stop FBI attacks on the African People's Socialist Party, right? What is that all about? This group of people, they're a movement, and you can see if you look at the movement, there's actually, believe me, believe it or not, there's a lot of pictures here, but there's a lot of black people and white people involved. It is a socialist, a very small socialist group in the United States. They do things. They have like, I think they have some furniture stores in poor black communities and some other um, another thing I know they do is they have these food stalls where they have like fresh vegetables in some of the poor black inner city areas where it's harder to get that kind of stuff. They do stuff. They do social stuff, whatever the hell they do. They do their stuff, right? But what did the FBI do about that? And why do they say hands off the Uhuru movement, right? And they say attacks in St. Louis, attacks in St. Bert. Why they attacked us, right? I don't know how much you know about the Uhuru movement, but it's quite simple. Whoops, I don't want to lose this. They are an organization and they are socialist and they're anti-imperialist and they oppose the US's government and moves around the world. And the FBI came in and like grabbed them all, handcuffed them, took their computers, went through their stuff and said, you guys are working for the Russians. And it had to do with at some point there's an anti-imperialist organization, anti-globalist organization in Russia, and they went to like a meeting there or some kind of a seminar. And now nobody was charged with a crime, but a lot of their stuff was taken, and the government harassed them and came in like the one guy, he's 80 years old. They grabbed the guy, they handcuffed him, threw him on a curb, him and his wife. Come on, the guy's 80 years old, he's unarmed. What the hell, you got to grab the guy, cuff him and all that stuff. And he was never even accused of a crime. So they did all this stuff to this group. Here's my point about the Uhuru movement. They accused him of working with Russia, with an outside country, when in fact they weren't, but they accused them of doing that. So the US says, if you're in the US, if we accuse you of working with another country, well, my God, you got to be locked up and harassed and all, even though the evidence isn't there. But meanwhile, the US says, there's protests in Iran. We're going to support the protests, support any violence that goes on. Oh, the people have to have internet. They're openly saying, see, that's the hypocrisy that I hate. The rules for me, not for you. The US can support Iranian protests, but nobody can have any discussion. The Uhuru people can't go to an anti-imperialist, anti-globalist meeting in Moscow and come home without getting nabbed by the FBI. Now, again, if they've been doing so much dirt, explain to me why this happened months ago. Not one of them's been accused of a crime, been charged with any crime, anything like that. I think it was a harassment more than anything else, tell you the truth. But when it comes down to it, and they had no history of crime, no history of nothing. It was kind of an activist an activist group, a social group, a political group. They like ran somebody for office that got like 1.6% of the vote. I mean, they were kind of fringe. When you listen to what they're saying, they're very, very angry about the discrimination against black people in poor areas. And, they make a lot of sense and they're doing their thing. I believe in people having a right in a free country to politically state their case any way they choose and run for government, all that kind of stuff, right? That's what they were doing. FBI went after them. You're working with the Russians. But the US will openly say, we are trying to support protests in Iran. I'm willing to bet that they were the ones that were actually getting the protests started. And right now they're continuing going. It's keeping them continue. And let me add this. There's been a couple of very suspicious actions happened recently. There was a in Iran, there was a fire in a jail where a bunch of people died. There was an attack on a holy site, a machine gun by some crazy outlandish group. And doesn't that sound like the kind of group the U.S. supports? I guarantee you the damn U.S. was behind those attacks. It's, oh boy, Iranians are having some protests. Hey, we got to put some money behind that and destabilize Iran. So the U.S. wants to destabilize Iran. The U.S. wants to destabilize Nicaragua, right? But yet they want to pretend. Let me find this. that somehow we stand up for what's good. Let me show you this again. Let me show you why this is bull crap again. Here's once again the letter from the Democrats, the original letter saying we write to Joe Biden when the one that they withdrew. We write with appreciation for your commitment to Ukraine's legitimate struggle against Russia's war of aggression. Your support for the self-defense of an independent, sovereign, and democratic state has been supported by Congress. Wait a minute. According to this, Joe Biden supporting an independent, sovereign, democratic state. Well, first of all, Iran's independent, Iran's sovereign, and it's none of your damn business whether it's democratic or not. That's up to the people of Iran, one way or the other. And whatever it is, it's none of the business of the U.S. But how hypocritical are these members of Congress saying that? And that's what kills me. I will support an independent and sovereign and democratic nation. See, I was on Gonzalo Lira's show today earlier, and I was talking about this. I used to have, a lot of my radio show in Washington, in DC, WPFW. I used to have a lot of members of Congress on. I'd have members of Congress on every couple months at least, right? Sometimes a couple times in the same month. And I'd talk to them about stuff. I can't do that anymore. None of them could come on my show anymore because I would ask them things like this and they couldn't deal with that. If I was to say, if a member of Congress was to come on and I was to say, I have some questions about Ukraine, and they would say, yeah. And I would ask them for starters. Do you believe that the United States had anything to do with the change of government in 2014 in Ukraine? That's what I would ask a member. Now, let me ask you this. Could they answer it? Could a member of Congress answer it? Could they have a discussion with me about it? They couldn't possibly do that because I could put too much information out. If they said, no, the U.S. had nothing to do with it whatsoever, did the U.S. admit to spending $5 billion in Ukraine in the years leading up to that? What did they do with that $5 billion? Was Victoria Nuland in Maidan Square handing out cookies during this? What was the Assistant Secretary of State doing there during this change of government, shall we say? Was there a recording of Victoria Nuland and Jeffrey Pyatt naming the people who were going to be in the new government 2 weeks before the coup, before the change of government? So if the United States wasn't involved, how'd they know? And why were they talking about naming the people, who they wanted, who they didn't want? If it's a sovereign, independent government, certainly the U.S. wouldn't have any input in that. So they couldn't come on my show because they couldn't answer those questions. And because the discussion would be, if the U.S. was involved in the change of government, then in fact, they're not sovereign. But you're going to say the U.S. was not involved. I'm going to say the U.S. was. You'll say the U.S. wasn't. Congressman so-and-so or Congressperson so-and-so. And they couldn't come on my show because when they said no, I'd say, okay, so I say the U.S. was involved. And let me give you further evidence. The U.S. has stayed involved with it. Joe Biden was there. His son went there and made money. Numerous Americans immediately. So the U.S. wasn't involved in overthrowing the government. But as soon as there was a new government, it was extremely pro-American, and Americans flooded in there and started building bio research labs. But it was independent. We didn't have anything to do with it. Started becoming members of like corporation boards and getting paid big money, but we didn't have anything to do with it. And eventually, the U.S. ends up paying every single bill. The U.S. started arming and training immediately. We didn't have anything to do with the change of government, but as soon as the change of government happened, we started arming and training and started building trenches, started readying for war. The United States, after the change of government, a pro-U.S. government came in, and that pro-U.S. government immediately started prepping for war with Russia. But we had nothing to do with it. Seems implausible, I would argue. Seems extremely implausible. So they couldn't come on my show because I could easily demonstrate that the United States was involved in the regime change operations in there. Now, and then we could go to one after the other. Were we involved in regime change operations in Libya, in Venezuela? Right now, are we in Venezuela? in Iraq, in Syria. It was the United States. So the United States is involved in regime change all over the place, but this one they weren't. The very one that they're paying for everything right now, they weren't. Is the United States involved in regime change operation in Nicaragua? Admittedly. In Iran? Admittedly. So the U.S. admits that they're trying to do regime change in Iran. So that means that it won't be a democratic government. It won't be an independent and sovereign government. If I change your government, then don't argue afterwards it's independent and sovereign. So the U.S. now thinks that it has the right to say to Nicaragua and Iran, we're going to punish you. And what are they punishing them for? For not falling in line and doing what you're told and being a puppet client state. That's all it is. The hypocrisy is astounding. That's what it's about. That's the whole thing. All right. So guys and girls, thanks a lot. That was it. I just wanted to touch base on Iran and Nicaragua. This is a shorter than normal video, which, my videos are normally pretty long. So I guess 35 minutes is shorter than normal. Thanks a lot, everybody. I forgot to look at the super chats. That'll drag things out a little bit. Let's go to the super chats. Oh, okay. So Top J says truth sense versus nonsense. Thank you, Top J. We keep going up. Sparky Garland, great work this morning with Gonzalo Lira. Thanks a lot. I had a lot of fun. I really enjoyed going on Gonzalo Lira's channel. Really appreciate getting that opportunity. Appreciate Gonzalo. We got someone else. Lander 15 says, wow, got a double dose of you today. You, Gonzalo, some things to think about with your astute observations. Well, thank you very much, Lander 15. Certainly appreciate it. And of course, chicken patties there, and somebody's under saying 420. Always want to hear that, don't we? All right. Let's go to Rockfin. And we always get some good questions on Rockfin too. Let's go for it. Thank you to Ronnie Dodone. Dodoni? I probably screwed that up some kind of way. All right, here's a question from Zach. I've been thinking about your pondering of the global South and African countries who've been wronged by Western coups, assassinating dictators, etc. If Russia had approached them, offering them from non-combat battalions identified by the lost leaders, name or other tribute, if these groups were flamboyantly highlighted all around the Donbass, even the Western media might have taken a bite. It would put the Western media in a jam. It would put them in a real jam. That's why I would do it if I were Russians. Pete Freeman says, keep on trucking, baby. Lynn Byer says, great show with Lyra. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. And somebody else mentioned, is this, they looked at my hat and they said, is this Garland or Run DMC, right? Thanks a lot. Let me see if there's any more. What was I going to say? Yeah, I had a good time with there. And just, I like the bucket hats. I bought this. Let me tell you about my bucket hat story. I was hanging out with my daughter and I wandered in, where were we in? What's the place? It's Pennsylvania, where Pennsylvania Dutch country is. Lancaster. I used to call it Lancaster, but the people there told me, no, it's Lancaster. So I'm screwing around. I wander in a Adidas outlet and I see this hat. And it's like $25, but it's half price. And it's so, kind of loose and beat up and washed. And I'm like, man, that hat looks like somebody ran over it with a truck. That's my kind of hat. Oh, it looks worn and beat up. I grabbed it, I put on, and when something's old and beat up and it's actually new, but it's made to be pre-washed look. And I'm like, you know what? That's me. That's my hat. I love it. And I bought it and it's comfortable. And I just started wearing it and I saw myself with it on camera. I like, it was fooling around doing something. I put it on. I'm like, that's really weird. It looks like an old fishing hat. That's me, no real thought about it. I just think it's cool. So that's the bottom line. I like my Run DMC bucket hat. I forgot that Run DMC wore these kind of hats. All right. Well, thank you much, everybody. And oh man, good old Salty Texas Trucker. What's happening there? STT that says thank you very much. And thank you very much, Salty Texas Trucker. And thanks everybody. I'm tired. God, I had a long day. I had to get up. And normally about mid-morning, I catch the train to Washington, D.C. This morning, I got up early at like 6 and got myself together, got stuff done. And I ended up getting on the train at like 8:20 8:24 or something. No, 8:44. I got on the train this morning to head to DC. And then I had stuff to do. And then I did the show with Gonzalo Lira for an hour and kept on booking. So I had a very busy day. And yes, I'm kind of tired right now. But I wanted to come on and say hi to everybody, hang out with you guys. Garland, you look like an old an old Puff Daddy. It would be old because it went from Puff Daddy to P. Diddy, right? At any rate, thanks a lot, everybody. And don't forget, as always, I certainly appreciate everybody. Number one, smash that like button. In the words of Alex Christoforous, smash the like button. Number one. Number two, anybody who can, I certainly appreciate whether it's Patreon or Cash App or Buy Me a Coffee or whatever, anybody, all that stuff scrolling across the bottom, anybody. And I have my Cash App there, a $ DC Radio Man, anyone who can donate to help keep the channel going. I appreciate that. If you can, the one thing that really helps is, please, everybody, go to my Rockfin channel, ROKFIN, rockfin.com/Garland Nixon. And you could become a member at no charge. Anybody, you'll see 99.9% of my stuff. I do have one premium show on Rockfin. We all Rockfin creators all have to do, not have to, but we agree to do one premium show per week. That premium show for me is every Wednesday morning at 9 o'clock with Scott Ritter. It's great. I do the first 20 minutes on here. It's really an awesome show, tell you the truth. I learned so much from Scott. It's a lot of fun. But that's the only thing you have to be a member. It's $9.99 a month if you can afford it. If you can't, just do everything. Just become a free member of all of my stuff and enjoy the show. But if you can afford that $9.99 a month to become a member of my Rockfin channel, it will be greatly appreciated. And I feel like I really need to keep my Rockfin channel strong, because at some point, they could toss me out here. I'll say the wrong thing about COVID or the what. There's a lot of interesting lawsuits going on now with the what, and if I say the wrong thing, I'm tossed off or whatever the case may be. Someday they may just decide I'm a Russian bot and throw me off of YouTube. So if that ever happens, I want to make sure that all my YouTube friends are, and family and community, I like that word, community, are also Rockfin, a part of my Rockfin community. Please, rockfin.com/Garland Nixon. If nothing else, just go there, become a member of the community for free. If you can afford that $9.99 a month, it would be a great help. And of course, there are lots of other ways scrolling across the screen to help keep the channel going. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate it. I'm tired, but I had to, even though I did an hour with Gonzalo and a 2-hour radio show in the studio for DC today, I appreciate everybody. So I had to come on here and chat a little bit with which I thought was important. I thought it's important to demonstrate the contradictions. It's important to demonstrate the contradictions between what the Brandon, monsters say and what they do. What they claim and who they really are needs to be exposed. Greeting from Denmark. There we go. Thanks a lot, Leonardo da Vinci. Thank you very much. Certainly appreciate that. I appreciate everybody being a part of this. Peace. Garland Nixon. I forgot to give my email address. For God's sake, I forgot that. My email address is garlandin@gmail.com. My first name and the first letter of my last name. garlandin@gmail.com. Peace. I'm out.